Welcome to the Support Raising Solutions podcast, where we help new and current ministry workers grow in being spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded Great Commission workers. Welcome to the Support Raising Solutions podcast. My name is Callie Davis, and I will be your delightful host for the day. And I'm excited to be joined by Chris Haas. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Callie. It's great to be here.
So glad you could join us. Chris is actually a local. I didn't even think, unfortunately, to invite him into the studio. So we are doing this long distance, but Chris just works and lives in the area right in Northwest Arkansas with Support Raising Solutions. And we invited him here today because we wanted to talk a little bit about some more financial things, especially as the year wraps up. And Chris, after working as a financial advisor for Clement Financial Services, in 2010, he left that work to start a brand new nonprofit focusing on financial health for families. And he founded and is the president of Freedom 5-1 Ministries. So we are delightful to have that specific expertise here. And Chris also currently teaches personal finance. And then he and his wife, Tiffany, who I have loved to have gotten to know her better. She actually works in our office now. They have been active in missions all over the world. And okay, this is me nerding out just a little bit, Chris. I'm excited because he is one of the faces on the boot camp videos. So if you recognize his voice, ladies and gentlemen, it is because if you've gone through our training, you will have heard from him before. I feel like I'm in the presence of a celebrity. I will ask you for your signature later.
Somehow they heard about my illustrious high school acting career, so there we go.
Wow. Well, thank you again for lending a different expertise this time, but joining us again. And I mentioned today we wanted to talk about finances, and one of the kind of core thoughts and the core driving principles of SRS is being vision driven. And that is as opposed to being budget driven. The idea that we value being fully funded. We value the vision that God has for your ministry and family and not limiting that. So, Chris, I kind of want to kick it off with a question that is probably on some people's minds. I know I've heard it in boot camp, in training that I've led. Is fully funded simply about getting more money? Since that isn't really why we do ministry, I thought.
No, it's not. Well, hey, and again, it's so good to be talking to everybody who's listening today, and let me just say right off the bat that this area of finances can be a real complicated one, especially when we choose to go the ministry route versus other professional type of avenues that we take. And so, when we think about wanting to be fully funded in ministry. I like to think of the word healthy. What we're really saying is we want to be healthy as an individual or as a married couple because we also want our families to be healthy. And so there's a lot that kind of goes into that in terms of being healthy. And so part of the heart of our ministry at Freedom 5-1 is to sit with families so that their finances can be healthy, so that they can play their best role in the Great Commission.
That's great. And that is a shift of perspective, because I think often we think about trying to raise more support. It is, well, you are asking people for money, but I'm hearing that subtle shift of it's less about the fact that you're trying to raise more money. It's more about the impact on your family and your ministry.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the healthier you are, in ministry, the more you can focus on the things that God has put in front of you. If you're kind of constantly stressed about money and running behind, or you're just, you don't have the money to do various things that you would really like to do, that financial strain can really, bring you down and be kind of a constant drag. And so you don't want that to be the case. And I remember one of the clients we helped, early on, who was going overseas to Guatemala. We helped them with the vision that they needed to have car repair money. Well, they had never thought of actually saving for that particular category of their life. And so, but they did. And so they began to do that as well as a number of other savings inside of their budget. And as a result of that, when the first car repair came and it was an $800 car repair, they were able to just fix their car. And I remember them, emailing me back and saying, this is changing our life because we have the money that we need to be able to do life effectively and to be able to do that overseas.
Mm. And I love that phrase, the ability to do life effectively. And I feel like those types of keywords are going to be what we're going to talk about throughout this time of it's not about more, it's not about quantity, it's about the quality and what you can do to really kind of maximize ministry is the wording we've used in training before. It's not just, or it's not about the money. It's about being able to thrive where God has planted you. Now, I'm curious, you mentioned the car expenses. Do you see specific areas in personal life that staff need to have their vision expanded? Is there common areas that people just kind of leave in the lurch?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the joys that we have as a ministry is meeting with a lot of ministry workers, a lot of people going overseas, different types of things. And one of the things they typically leave out is any kind of savings. And so whether it's an emergency fund type of savings, or it's for the practical things of life, like sending back Christmas gifts to family, back home. We like to kind of elevate people's view of their own budget and really give them a vision for the money that it would take to really live in a healthy way. And so that also, has to do with retirement. A lot of people will really skimp on, raising enough money to be able to save and invest for retirement. And so we believe whether you're working at a local corporation or you're out on the ministry field somewhere, that's an area of life that God expects us to raise the money so that we can be healthy in that area. There have been stories of missionaries who came off the field who didn't have anything to their name because they over spiritualized the idea of just trusting God and somehow God will provide in the end versus having the faith to actually raise the money to be able to put it aside just like their supporters do back home. And so we just believe there's some areas like retirement and savings that really can easily get pushed to the side, but that does not need to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm curious, is there a sweet spot where your faith is that the money is there to be raised versus not, or the faith that the money is there, and then that meets the faith that you trust God, that you're not trying to secure all the money to cover every eventuality? Because I feel like you could go to one side or the other too easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you really have to ask yourself, the question, like I do every year, Lord, what are you putting on my heart? Like what is our vision as we go into this next year? What are the things that you want us to do as a family? What are the things you want us to do in our ministry? What are the resources that we would need to be able to make those things happen? And so it's really a prayerful time with the Lord as we kind of even pray through our budget. And we pray through the different areas and we ask the Lord for his insight and his wisdom. So what we're doing is we're not just coming up with numbers on a piece of paper or, just trying to satisfy our own desires, but we really are seeking him. Psalm 37:4 says that if we delight ourselves in the Lord, that he will give us the desires of our heart. And so, as we're walking with him and we have desires for different things, it's totally okay to say, Lord, we would love to take an amazing family vacation this summer. If you were to allow us to have the money to do that, that's something we want to do. And my family and I, we just got back from a really cool summer vacation. We got to go to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. And so, it was one of those bucket list vacations. We road tripped it all the way out from Arkansas to Colorado to Wyoming. And we had a great time. But vacations like that are not cheap. They're
Hmm.
expensive.
Yeah.
And so you really have to say, you know what, this is a vision that we have as a family. We want to spend time together with our family, whether it's a summer vacation or some other time during the year. But we just feel like that's really important to the bonding of our family. My wife, in fact, she's a big proponent of us doing things together like that because she can see just how valuable it is to the relationships. We have
Hmm.
5 kids, 3 boys and 2 girls. And so we've just found that to be a really helpful thing. So you have to have a vision, obviously.
Hmm.
You want it to be, obviously inspired by the Lord, but then you have to put that vision into play, which requires faith as well.
Mm. Now, I know this might be a whole new concept for some of our listeners, the idea that God's provision includes vacation. How can you be sure that that vision is from the Lord and not just something you really like the idea of?
No, totally. Well, even as I was getting into ministry and we were starting, Freedom
Mhm.
51, I knew that with a big family like we had, that we would need to raise a lot of resources to be able to
Yeah.
be in full-time ministry. And so I didn't feel like that was a big stretch for the Lord. When you think about him, he's if the scripture is true, and if he really does own everything, and Psalm 24, 1 and 2 says the Lord owns everything on the face of the earth and in the heavens and all of us, then, asking God for resources to an unlimited God is
Mhm.
really not that big of a deal. And so when we come to him and we say, Lord, I would love to see this happen, unless it's just not in his will for some reason, and he can certainly say no. But it's kind of one of those things that we say, hey, listen, is it possible that one of our kids is supposed to go to a Christian school? Well, what would it cost to be able to make that happen? And we begin to pray through that and kind of figure that out. Can we do it financially? Would we maybe need to raise some additional money? But it's a prayerful exercise
Mhm.
that we have to go through as believers. I mean, I think whether you're in full time ministry or working out in the corporate world somewhere, you should go through the same process. It shouldn't be any different for a missionary than it is
Right.
for someone working at Walmart or Tyson or Apple or anywhere else. We're all called to be stewards of God's resources.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And so just because we're in full time ministry doesn't make our resources any different than the other person's. It's just that maybe we think about, not wanting to spend our money in excess, maybe a little bit
Hmm.
more than the average person. Um, but to your question, I mean, I just think that it's a really healthy thing uh, to want to be able to meet some of those desires and wants of our family, and that's
Hmm.
not a bad thing. God has put us here to enjoy life and lots of other things. In fact, I was snow skiing with a pastor about 10 years ago, and I was feeling a little bit guilty as I was riding
Sure.
up
Hmm.
riding up the mountain because I love snow skiing so much. And at the same time, I was like, man, should I really be spending money on this men's, trip or whatever it was? And, the Lord really spoke to me on that chairlift. And he spoke out of First Timothy and he said, I have given all things for you to enjoy. And then that verse just came to mind. And it was like the Lord was saying, hey, listen, Chris, I designed you with a love for the outdoors. And this is one of the things that you love more than any other recreation that you could do. Is I want you to enjoy this. I want you to take this in and have a great time. And so I just really appreciate that about God and that just enjoying life is actually part of the fabric of what he's created us for.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I think it reminds me of kind of what it meant to me growing up as a missionary kid with my parents being fully funded and the ripple effects for how we practice the effects of God's provision to like what that means for everyone around us. For me as a kid, my parents being fully funded, it meant I felt like a normal kid. I didn't have this weird stigma of being a missionary kid. I didn't think it was a horrible life being a missionary, even though well, even though especially my older brothers were not sure what we were getting ourselves into, it was my parents' second career to go into ministry. And I still remember my parents broke the news that we were going to move to Arkansas and work for Crew with Family Life. And my one brother turns to the other and he's like, all right, well, you better put a lot on your Christmas list this year because we won't get Christmas again.
Christmas is over, right?
Yeah, no, and that was some of the experience for some of the missionaries we had interacted with. And so that is what my brother had internalized. But instead, bless my parents and the training they had and the equipping they had and the work they put in. Like when I went into ministry, it was a no-brainer that I knew God could provide, that I knew support raising was something that was doable and survivable and thrivable. It rippled so much down to my life to see that you could live a normal life, a happy life. Like as a kid, like we still ate out, Chris. We still even occasionally went to the movies. And to see a life that I interact now with, just living in Northwest Arkansas as a missionary, most of my friends in my community aren't in missions. And I want them to have a picture of an abundant God, not that, working in Christian work full time means you live on nothing. Like it's not more holy. I don't want a picture of a God that can barely sustain the people that he calls to his work. I want them to see that God is boundless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really does go to the character and nature of God. Is God and a God who loves us and who sometimes showers us with abundance? Absolutely. Are there times that we're called to sacrifice and to go without? Absolutely. It's not one or the other. It's both. And we go through seasons of our ministry and our life where sometimes things are a lot tighter, and we have to kind of, cinch the belt a little bit. And then there's other times when we do have more. And so that's kind of the ebb and flow of the normal family, not just someone who's in ministry. And so, we might think if we've only been in ministry that other people don't have challenges financially. Well, that's just not the case. There are plenty of challenges for every family that's out there, and so we do have a walk by faith because we are reaching out and we're asking people to give. We're really giving them an opportunity to give to our vision. And to give to the changed lives that we hope to see as a result of the ministry that God has called us to. And so we're asking them to give to that vision and to that ministry. We're not necessarily asking them to give to meet our needs, even though that is how we earn a salary and pay for our ministry expenses. But it's that vision. And so being vision driven is just different than just being budget driven. When someone looks at their budget, they may say, well, we don't have the money to be able to have people over, to be able to invite people over, to sponsor dinners or whatever. We just don't have the money. Well, maybe what we need to do is say, hey, listen, we have a vision to have people over. And we want to be able to provide a dinner for our kids' friends and for cell group or whatever. So let's make sure that we bring the money in to be able to accomplish our vision. And so that's really what it comes down to, whether it's a family vision or a ministry vision, is we say, hey, listen, there's this vision that we have. And sometimes we have unfulfilled vision, vision that hasn't happened yet. Like, for instance, my wife and I, we're hoping for a different house in the future. We haven't been able to get there, yet.
It's been a long journey for you guys.
Oh, man, we have been kind of stuck in our current situation for a number of years. COVID hit, the housing market prices shot up, interest rates have now gone up. And so it's just been a really hard house buying process for us. But we have this vision of being able to use our home for ministry, for inviting people in. And in a limited way, we do that now. But we would like to take that to a different place. And we'd like to have a place that's peaceful and that where we can really see the vision that God has laid on our hearts really played out. So we're working towards that. Part of this thing is sometimes it takes a lot of hard work, and you
Yeah.
have to stay diligent. You have to keep going and not give up on whatever vision God has laid on your heart. And so for us, that's one that's not fulfilled yet and that we're really actively working on.
Yeah. I think listening to you, kind of my takeaway is I don't want to be the limiting factor for God's provision for me. So I don't want to be the one that comes to the conclusion that this is it. This is all God has for me. I will stop here. Instead, I want God to be the one that is the one leading those ebbs and flows. So if it is a time of less, I will rest in what God has provided, as Paul so eloquently talked about. But I also want to say, if God has more for me, I by golly want to get out there and be a part of that, and not just say, "No, God, no, I'm good. I'm gonna stress out over here. We're fine."
No ministry ever started with all the resources already in
Oh,
the bucket.
true. Mm-hmm.
When we think about the way that we started off, most of us, if we're in support raising, we didn't start off with a single dollar. So
Mm-hmm.
everything was from scratch. Everything was a blank slate. And so, we say, hey, listen, what do we want this to look like in the future? We were starting at the very lowest potential part of that. And so it's okay. It's okay to say, hey, listen, this is where we want to go. We have a vision to get here to this point as a family. We want to be fully funded. We're not fully funded yet, but we want to be. And there's a lot of great reasons to be fully funded, a lot of healthy reasons. And so we want to be able to take family vacations and have an emergency fund. And we want to be able to save for retirement and do the things that will help us long term, not only to prepare well for the future, but also help us to stay in ministry. Because by having a healthy financial picture, we get to stay in ministry a lot longer. I heard a story recently from a motivational speaker, and he said, if you take an oak tree seed and you plant it in a 2-foot bucket of dirt, he said that seed, that tree will never reach its full potential. It just won't. The roots can't grow. They can't become what it needs to be to really grow as a tree. And so sometimes if you've limited yourself in your thinking about God, what God is willing to provide and what he might be willing to do, you kind of need to break free of that. And it's like taking that seed and putting it in different soil that has room to grow. And now that oak tree can potentially reach its full height and full potential. And so I feel like that's just a great word picture of kind of what we need to do in our finances in this area is we need to look up and we need to say, Lord, I want a God-inspired vision. I'm willing to work really hard to see it happen. And I'm willing to take my faith and really trust you for the results.
I love that. I love that picture. And I think especially as we're talking about the end of the year, where oftentimes people are assessing kind of where their finances were, happens this next year, that's encouraging to look forward that fully funded goal, whether it is close or maybe still really distant. It is a good goal. It is worth working towards. And, it's something we work towards one step at a time. Not overwhelmed by how far left you have to go, because God does provide, and it's something that we want to encourage people, help people, and make sure that vision is something we hold in front of us continually.
Well, if there's ever anything I can do for people who are listening to this podcast, just know we're available to talk through finances. It's what our ministry does every day. We meet and we coach people up in this area. And one of our passions is to help Great Commission workers around the world to have healthy finances, to be generous themselves, and to live out a life of generosity and generous stewardship so that they can fulfill their ministry calling and play whatever part God has called you to play in the Great Commission.
Well, Chris, if people wanted to know more, where should they go?
Our website is www.freedom, the number five, one.com, freedom51.com. And that's where they can go. They can get any kind of contact information off that. And again, we'd love to serve even more. Up to this point, we've served families going to about 50 different nations, all kinds of in-country ministry workers, pastoral staff, and of course, people outside the church as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for being available for people that are wanting to get some help, get some information, get some guidance. And thank you so much for your time today, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Callie, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again for a lovely podcast. I do have a very important special announcement, so please hang on for just about 30 more seconds. We are taking a break on publishing new podcast episodes. So, Chris, you were our wonderful last guest at the foreseeable future for the next few months. So, yes, we will be taking a 6-month break. Now, in that time, if you are a subscriber, if you have subscribed to our blog and our articles, which you can do at supportraisingsolutions.org/blog, we will still be sending out one monthly email with some specially curated resources, a couple articles, and a couple of our past podcasts about a specific topic. So, for example, in December, we're specifically going to be highlighting spiritual health and how to kind of have some vision and thankfulness towards your ministry partners. December is often a time when we send Christmas cards or Christmas gifts to partners. And so there'll be about 2 podcast episodes and 2 articles from our library to kind of work through that topic and highlight that. So if you aren't a subscriber to our articles, please do check them out. If you are a longtime podcast listener, thank you so much. We will be back in the future. We're just needing to push our capacity for an upcoming conference that we're leading and a few other projects in the works. So thank you for hanging with us. We will be back. And in the meantime, we hope you can check out our extensive library, all the wonderful guests and experts that have joined us over the years, and be encouraged. Go forth in grace, and thank you for joining us today. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode as we work to give more insight into building and maintaining your ministry partnership team.